In this video, I'm going to discuss the structure and function of the human digestive system. Your digestive system is first responsible for mechanically and chemically breaking down food. And then these food particles, that's really the digestion part, those food particles are then absorbed into your body cells, or waste products that you can't use are eliminated as feces. This system is supported by bacteria that are known as the microbiome. Most of them are found in your large intestine. And these bacteria do a number of things that help support your extraction of nutrients from food. For example, the bacteria are able to digest complex polysaccharides, which we typically call dietary fiber, because we're unable to digest that with our own enzymes, but the bacteria can do that for us and give us some nutrients from that fiber. The bacteria in the microbiome also synthesizes several key vitamins and amino acids, which again are able to be absorbed by our body, and does help break down certain toxins as they move through the digestive system. The system itself, or the food tube, your gastrointestinal tract or your GI tract, is also called the alimentary canal. And it's really one long continuous tube that starts at your mouth, travels through the pharynx, to the esophagus, to the stomach, to your small intestine, to your large intestine, to the rectum, and then ends, of course, with the anus. And it's really a tube that runs through your middle of your body from one end to the other, open to the environment. There are also several important accessory organs that are not part of this food tube, but they provide key materials that allow your bodies to digest food. And these are the salivary glands, the pancreas, and the liver, and so I'll be discussing them as well. The gastrointestinal tract basically is the same from one end to the other, and this diagram gives you a sense of how it's put together. The inside layer is a mucous membrane. So this mucous membranes are found in all sorts of tubes that have an opening to the outside. And you notice that this mucous membrane is folded. So you have sort of a squiggly inside of your digestive tube. Underneath that mucous membrane layer, you have a submucosal layer, and then you have several layers of muscles. We have muscles that run both in a circular direction around your digestive tube and also in a longitudinal direction, that's up and down. And those two different directions are very important in order to move food along the digestive system and to sort of break it down by physically churning it by the muscles contracting. And then the whole thing is wrapped in a thick membrane layer. It's held together in multiple directions by membranes because it is a rather convoluted system with this tube, and you don't want it to get twisted in on itself. So here's a diagram of the alimentary canal, or your GI tract, again starting with your mouth, going through the esophagus to the stomach to your pancreas, one of those accessory organs, and then the small intestine, which you notice is really taking up the biggest amount of space, then the large intestine, and finally ending in the anus. The whole thing takes up about 28 feet on average, and of that, this small intestine is really about 22 to 25 feet of it. So it's small in diameter, but not in length. As I already mentioned, it's the contraction of both a circular and longitudinal smooth muscle fibers that allows food to be moved down your alimentary canal, down your GI tract. And the way that your body controls which muscles move and what timing allows for certain types of movements. So it can be just sort of mixed up, that would be churning, or it can be segmented in different sections, like we see in this diagram, where this part gets kind of separated out by some circular fibers, contracting on either place, and then we'll be able to mix that food together. And then the food itself is moved through the tube by a progression of contractions known as peristalsis. So this illustration on the bottom shows you that, where the contraction happens kind of above where the food is, and then as the contraction will kind of push the what we call a bolus of food, a ball of food down, and the contraction just kind of, squeezes it down the tube until it gets to whatever the next stage is. Your digestive system is under autonomic control. It is involuntary. You are not in charge of it. And it is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's sort of turned on or upregulated by your parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest part of your autonomic nervous system. So let's start at the top. The beginning, food enters the mouth, and the mouth's job is to physically break up solid particles. And saliva and mucus is produced by various glands and goblet cells inside the mouth in order to moisten and allow the food to be kind of slippery and to move along. Your salivary glands also produce an particular enzyme called amylase, which can help digest carbohydrates. Those complex carbohydrates we tend to call starches actually start to get digested in the mouth. And if you chew on something sort of plain like a saltine cracker long enough, you can taste some of that sweetness coming out. Now, this physical, mechanical breakup of solid food is greatly aided by your teeth. Your teeth are the hardest structures in the body. They are essentially bone with an enamel coating, and that's enamel coating on the outside is what makes them so hard. And you know, of course, that you have teeth that fall out. You have about 20 teeth, your baby teeth. And then if you have a large enough mouth and have not had your wisdom teeth removed, you would end up with 32 permanent teeth in your mouth. You can see that the baby teeth actually develop in the jaw, both in the mandible and the maxillary part of your face, on this example from a child's skull. After food goes through the mouth, it moves into the pharynx and down through the esophagus. And this is just a passageway from where food is ingested or taken in, and really the main digestion centers. Yes, carbohydrates start to be digested in the mouth, but most of the work actually happens later on. The coordination of swallowing is actually a reflex, and both your pharynx and your esophagus are involved in moving food from your mouth down to your stomach. So this illustration just kind of takes you through the steps. It skips one important part. The bolus of food is what we call just sort of that chewed up collection of soft food particles. So in the mouth, as it moves to the back of the mouth, it triggers the swallowing reflex. And the first thing that happens in swallowing is the soft palate, the back part of the mouth here, and the uvula, that little thing that sticks down in the back of your throat, they actually move up. And so it's going to close off the passageway, which is not shown in this diagram, so that you're not going to have food go up into your nasal cavity. But then after that point, just moving food to the back of your mouth triggers this swallowing reflex. Your larynx moves up and closes off by intersecting with the epiglottis. And so the trachea then is covered. You have a sphincter muscle, a circular muscle that typically is holding the top of the esophagus closed, so it has to relax and open so that this bolus of food can move down into the esophagus. And then the peristalsis muscle contraction pushes the food down the esophagus by the muscles above the bolus contracting and the muscles below relaxing until your bolus of food reaches the stomach. Again, there's another sphincter, another circular muscle that tends to hold this closed, and so that has to be relaxed before the bolus of food can actually move into your stomach. So that's the process of swallowing, and you don't have to think about it. Sometimes if you swallow sort of a dry particle or a big lump of something, you can feel this peristalsis happening down your esophagus, but generally we don't notice it happening when we're taking more reasonable bites of food. Now, your stomach is basically a pouch-like organ that hangs below your diaphragm in the upper left quadrant of your abdominal region and holds about 1 liter of material. You can stretch it a little bit more, but if you try to overstretch it, your stomach will probably protest and go through a sort of the reverse muscle relaxation to allow your contraction of your stomach to expel things up your esophagus and out when you vomit. The stomach is where protein digestion starts. It doesn't finish there, but it gets started there. You also see some absorption of water, certain salts, some particular drugs can move into the bloodstream from your stomach, and alcohol directly reaches the blood from the stomach. Within your stomach lining, the cells that make up the stomach, we have various cells that have important jobs to do. One is that secretes the hydrochloric acid, or HCl, that is needed to kill any bacteria that happens to be riding along with the food, and also to activate an enzyme that starts off as pepsinogen. That's how it's produced by the cells, but the acid turns it into an enzyme called pepsin, which actually does that protein digestion. And also your stomach produces protective mucus, which is alkaline. It is a high pH to sort of counteract that acid you're producing, which is there to protect the stomach itself. Things move out of the stomach at different speeds. Liquids go through the stomach the fastest, followed by carbohydrates, then proteins, and finally fats. Fats can stick around in your stomach for 3 to 6 hours. They're the last ones to go. So here's a diagram of your stomach. You can see it's sort of this curved organ. And again, we have various muscle layers that are headed in different directions, longitudinally, circularly, and then oblique is at a sideways angle. And so this allows the stomach to contract in a number of different directions. We have a sphincter up here around the esophagus closing off the top of the stomach. We have another sphincter down at the end of the stomach going into the small intestine, again, keeping it closed until we're ready to move the food along. Right after the stomach, or really right below the stomach, and then entering the digestive system right after the stomach, is the pancreas. We talked about the pancreas as an endocrine gland. It produces insulin to help blood sugar move from, or help glucose move from the bloodstream into cells. But it also is an exocrine gland. It produces substances that move down a small tube known as a duct. And these are substances to help us digest food. So there's a number of digestive enzymes that are released in the pancreatic duct, and that will go into the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, along with the material coming from the liver that is producing bile. So the pancreas produces a number of different kinds of enzymes so that you can digest all the parts of food: carbohydrates, fats, proteins. And then since we are eating things that used to be alive, you have DNA in every cell of that living thing. And so you have to digest those nucleic acids as well. These enzymes are secreted from the pancreas in an inactive form and then are activated by other enzymes once they enter the small intestine, because we don't want to digest our pancreas on the way. This would not be very good for long-term health. So here we see the duct from the pancreas, headed right into the small intestine, the duodenum, that first part, and then the liver is off. Really, the liver is a little bit more to the other side of the body. The pancreas is sitting right behind the stomach on the left-hand side. The liver is basically on the right-hand side. The gallbladder is just a storage organ to hold the bile that is produced by the liver, and then everything again is feeding into the small intestine. Your liver is the largest organ that you can just hold in one hand. And as this diagram shows, it's sitting right under your diaphragm, well protected by your ribs and the muscles of your back, because it's an extremely important organ. It's also one of the few parts of your body that can regenerate. So far as digestion is concerned, liver makes the bile, which is necessary for fat absorption, and it also has various roles in processing the products of digestion. So the blood from your digestive system, so all of the absorption down here in your small intestine, that blood actually goes through your liver first before it circulates to the rest of your body cells, and the liver does various things with those materials that have been digested. This diagram on the bottom is just showing you that what bile does, and a very important part of bile, is what's known as the bile salt. Bile allows fat, which normally is not going to mix with water. It allows it to be able to go into the bloodstream because the bile salt does have a hydrophilic side. It has a side that loves water. And when the bile salts surround a globule of fat, we have the water-loving part on the outside, and so then it can move into the bloodstream. So bile allows our body to absorb fat and put it into that very watery-based plasma in our bloodstream. So we've gotten through the stomach, and then the pancreas is dropping things into the first part of your small intestine. So we're going to talk about the rest of the small intestine. It takes up most of your abdominal cavity. Remember, I said it's most of the length of your food tube. The first part, which is actually the shortest, the duodenum, is where digestion is completed. That's where all those enzymes from the pancreas get dumped, and that's where food particles get broken down the most. And then the middle section, the jejunum, is where you're going to have all of this absorption that's going on, and that is the longest part. And then the third section, the ileum, kind of picks up some other important things that be absorbed, those bile salts and vitamin B12 and a couple other important nutrients are found just at the very end. And then we're done with the small intestine, moving into the large intestine. The large intestine's function is to reclaim the water that has been dumped in through the gastric juices in the stomach and the pancreatic juices coming from the pancreas. And so you don't want to just keep on, getting rid of all that water. You want to reabsorb as much as possible to not dehydrate your body. So the large intestine's job is to reabsorb that water, pick up various minerals, electrolytes that have also been part of that whole process, to be as efficient as possible in using these resources. There also are certain cells that are producing mucus throughout the large intestine, will help neutralize any acid that's left over from the stomach, helps hold things together, those waste products together, the fecal matter, and helps them sort of slide through your large intestine on the way out of your body. As I mentioned before, you have a large amount of bacteria here at the end of your digestive system. They tend to be called either the microbiome or sometimes intestinal flora is another word that you'll see. And their job, as I mentioned before, to digest some of those things that our body's not able to digest and providing certain key vitamins to us. And then the waste material will just collect at the end of the large intestine in the rectum until it's time for elimination. So the diagram of your large intestine, it actually sits in front of everything else. And so your stomach, is over here on this part of your body. You've got your stomach and you've got your liver. But sometimes when you say our stomach hurt, it's actually because you're having gas pains in the part of the transverse colon, part of your large intestine that goes across the front of your body. Of course, this is all tied together with lots and lots of membrane, so everything sits in the right place. Food comes in here from the small intestine, goes up and across and down through this S-shaped curve of the sigmoid colon. So the whole large intestine is also called the colon. And then it gets stored in the rectum until it leaves the body through the anus. So the process of getting rid of these waste products, the things that you cannot digest or absorb anything from, is known as elimination or defecation. And often it's triggered by the presence of food in the stomach or food moving into the small intestine, into the duodenum. So basically your body is saying there's some more food coming. We have to get rid of this matter that is in storage. And that caused what is known as a mass movement. And sort of there's a lot more contraction, more rapid contraction happening in the large intestine. Things typically move very slowly through the large intestine to reabsorb all that water and electrolytes. But when it's a mass movement, things can move quite quickly through the colon into the rectum, and you have sort of a stretching sensation as things pile up in the rectum. And so that will stimulate the reflexes to relax the internal sphincter, so that if the time is right, you can then voluntarily relax the external sphincter and allow things to leave the body. So that covers my overview of the various structures and their functions in the digestive system. Check your understanding. Can you name these organs from one end to the other of your gastrointestinal tract and describe the functions of each of those organs? What about the accessory organs that help support the digestion of food? Can you name and describe their structures and function? And can you explain why the name the digestive system is probably not a true representation of its function? If you don't know the answers, go back and review the appropriate parts in the video to prepare for class.